Hello and welcome to Oak Tree Dialogues, where we share important conversations and gain wisdom and new insights. Today I am with Lloyd Powell from Last Mile Counseling in Adelaide, Australia. And Lloyd is a dear friend of mine, which I have followed on social media for some number of years now. And I really enjoyed, Lloyd, your perspective. You have a kind of a dark sense of humor that is very provocative, and it enables us to think deeper and to reject obvious ideas that everybody accepts, right?
Yeah.
How would you describe yourself as a counselor?
I would say I'm an intuitive counselor. I don't have any plan when I go into a session about what's going to happen or any set of techniques that I'm going to be using. It's completely in the moment and in the flow. I like to think of it as I am in service to the person in front of me. And what that looks like for that particular person, there's no way I can really know what that is, because I'm a human being and I may know nothing about them whatsoever. So I like to, instead of trying to work that out intellectually, I like to think of it as a process of letting the divine speak through me and letting, my innate wisdom, which is really beyond my intellectual comprehension, come through in whatever way is going to serve that person best, and let miracles happen. It's a process of miracles, really.
Yeah, so it's deep listening, right? You're in tune with what is in the moment. Lloyd, you have talked I've been reading your post and following you, and you talk a lot about the abandonment trauma, and that's in our series about childhood traumas. I was interested in inviting you for this interview to know more about your perspective about abandonment trauma. First of all, could you tell us what is abandonment trauma? How does it show up? And can you tell us more about how examples of what can cause that kind of trauma in a child?
Sure, and I'm mainly talking from my own personal wounding, because that's how I really learn about anything, is through my own experience of it. I think that's really the only way in which we can really know something, is to experience it. So I'll talk about myself rather than make this generic. So for me, it's a deep feeling that I could be left alone and just ripped apart from whatever object of love and affection, and it suddenly, without warning. And there's a sense of panic there. It's just like, so there's this like tension that sometimes is hardly perceptible. Sometimes that's like right in your face, where it's like, I'm scared, I'm really scared that I'm going to be abandoned. I'm just going to be left alone to die in the desert. And the place that shows up most often for most people is in relationship, in romantic relationship.
So it's a deep insecurity, and it's interesting because the way you talk about it is in the present. That's how you feel even now as an adult, that deep insecurity, that deep fear that you'll be left alone. It seems like very visceral. It's not, as you say, it's not intellectual. It's something deeper and uncontrollable.
It's very deep. It's at the core. It's at like the absolute core, and obviously it's related to childhood. Obviously it's related to experiences as a child where that parental figure, for whatever reason, was unreliable. That's the key. That was unreliable.
So what would you say to someone to how can they recognize that maybe what they're dealing with, their problems in relationships, are somehow related to some childhood trauma, and it's not just about the current situation, it's more about something that happened in the past? How can you recognize like normal relationship that are based on the present compared to abandonment trauma, relationship problems, issues?
Okay, that's a good question. It has an irrational component. If it's coming from a childhood wounding, it's not because what the other person is doing and saying. Like they could be fully present and fully responsive, and still you're still feeling insecure in yourself. If it's coming from them, it's that you'll see the behavior in them that is not conductive to a healthy relationship. If they're, if they're acting like they're kind of half in, a half out, 1 minute they're there for you, 1 minute they're not, it's natural to feel insecure because that's an insecure connection. And a person free from abandonment wounding will be able to see that. And they'll say, okay, this person isn't reliable. They're not, for whatever reason, this probably isn't a person that I want to really date. And they'll exit the relationship. For a person with abandonment wounding, that will be the need for that person will be amplified.
Okay, they get kind of addicted to that kind of person in a way.
Yes.
So it's a toxic relationship because you can't let go of people that are not available. You're kind of attracted to that specific kind of people.
Yes.
Okay, so then the first step would be in noticing this pattern, that you keep repeating this pattern of bonding with people that are not available.
Definitely. That's a very good start to notice how you react, what kind of people you choose in a relationship, how it makes you feel. So self-observation. And to be honest, I think most people with abandonment wounding, it will be fairly obvious to them. Once they understand the concept, they'll go, yeah, that's me. That's what I do. It's not going to be a subtle, something subtle that needs to be uncovered. It's like they'll be in deep, in these cycles for a long time. They'll have many relationships where they're constantly on the edge, and it's a very unpleasant state to be in. It's not just like a mild anxiety. It's often a full-blown panic. It's just it's terror.
So in a way, once you've been wounded in that way and it's not been resolved, you kind of keep repeating it until it gets resolved. It's like we attract it so that it bring it in the forefront, so that you have to focus on it, you have to deal with it. That's how I see it. When you see like we keep repeating a pattern over and over again, and at one point you like, that's enough, I need to resolve this issue. Is that what happened to you? Like what triggered your in your journey, like what triggered, like, okay, I see there's an issue there and I want to go deeper and delve into this abandonment trauma? How was the journey?
Okay. Ooh, well, I had a very intense relationship. It was really a classic relationship that could happen. Someone with abandonment wounding. And I don't like labels, but this person was very unstable, potentially borderline personality disorder. And she was a very erratic person, and would often suddenly and without explanation, like attack me, like on an emotional level. It was an emotionally abusive relationship. And I went through 3 years of in relationship with this person, of constant breakups, constant turmoil. It was just the classic kind of codependent narcissist relationship, basically, where I was desperately trying to find love from this source of love that was impossible to manage. So I was coming up with all these thousands of strategies to how do I get this person to be a reliable source of love.
So you were trying to please that person and to be approved, I guess?
Well, just to get her to like be to love me. Yeah, like it's seeking love, approval, yes, but more so just affection and closeness, because that's what as abandonment wounding doesn't really care about just being liked. I got plenty of friends who like me. That's not really satisfying. I want to be like held. You're
the special person.
with one person.
Yes,
Yeah.
this one special person. Yes. So the more that this person rejects you, the more that you try to be loved. That's
Correct.
kind of the cycle.
Yeah, I mean that's what triggers the wounding. Is that cycle of withdrawal, and because that's what we've associated with love through our childhood is this unreliability. So that's what we seek, and that's what we find, unfortunately.
So what happened for you to like realize that, and what did you do that led you on this journey? For now you counseling people and you have gone through, you're on the other side of this trauma. How did you heal? What happened?
Oh, look, I wouldn't say I'm on the other side of this. I wouldn't say that, because it's like being an alcoholic. There's always that temptation to have a drink, and relapse is always possible. And also, just because I've been dealing with this wounding for a long time, I'm still see the patterns play out in more subtle ways. They're not as dramatic, but there's a ever growing process. So it probably doesn't end. It's not like you just come to the other side and sunshine and suddenly you're going to have a perfect relationship.
But it's a growing awareness that you have about the pattern first. That's the first thing. Yes. I see.
Yes. Yeah. So it's awareness. It is all about awareness and noticing, hey, I'm doing this. That's really the first thing. It's not, you're not going to be able to stop yourself doing it. It's too strong. It's like say if someone it's like not taking your phone calls, for example, it's like you're still going to be, maybe you're going to be calling them 20 times in that night. Maybe you're going to be feeling absolutely frantic. It's like, I need this person, like, and you're shaking and crying, and it's like they've left you alone. You are abandoned for that night, right? So in that situation, it's like just really being a compassionate witness to that state as much as possible. It's like, yeah, I really need this person. I really need this person. I understand I have to do this, So it's a process of reparenting, where we become the parent that was absent as a child in some regard, maybe not totally absent, but in some regard, and take ourselves through whatever we need to go through while kind of holding our hand while we're doing it.
So you're being compassionate to yourself while living with these emotions that are very intense. That's the first step, to be aware. Okay, I'm living these emotions and it's related to something else, so I'm going to reparent myself. Now, be the person, like be the change you want to see in the world. So be the person, the parent that you would have been good for you. So yeah. How do you do that?
How do you do that? Well, it's like, imagine you go to a counselor. What do you want from a counselor? You tell me, what do you seek when you go to a counselor?
I seek acceptance, first of all.
Okay. Yes.
So acceptance. I feel secure. I don't feel to have to justify. I don't feel blame. I don't feel shamed. Like it's okay. Whatever I'm feeling is okay. Yeah. Total acceptance. And I guess that's
Yes.
part of unconditional love. Yeah, this total acceptance, first of all. Yes. And yeah, someone who would just be hold space for my emotions, like to be held. Maybe not say so much, but just to be held and hold space for whatever I'm living. And if I want to cry, I can cry my heart out, my eyes out. I think that's the first comforting way that I would like to feel if I was feeling insecure and afraid, and yeah, just feeling that I'm alone, and that kind of fear. Is that what you do also?
Yes. That's what every counselor would do for sure. And and you just answered that question that you just asked. That's what you do to yourself while you're in that process.
Yes, I noticed that with my own childhood traumas, I the first thing that I noticed was how hard I talked to myself. Like this, I talked to you about this before, like this military drill sergeant. That's the voice. That's my inner voice, and it's really hard. And always like pick yourself up and go ahead, and you know, just go on, and you have to be strong all the time. Did you have that, like this kind of shaming voice that tells you that you cannot be weak, or is that something that you see other people experiencing, that you really have to change that inner voice to have soothing words towards yourself instead of this hard criticism?
Yeah, look, it's very common. It's like pretty much universal to a degree. This inner dialogue of you know, basically you're not doing it right. You know, you're failing. Get your shit together. Pull your shit together. You know, and you know, it's a voice of sometimes it's a voice of a parent. You know, maybe a parent was saying that. But even if that wasn't the case, it's pretty much a universal. You know, you could call it the ego, who's kind of saying, you're not good enough. You know, this story of not being good enough exists in us all, and it comes out in different ways. And that's one of the ways it can come out as a super critical kind of parental figure, like God figure sometimes, just like pointing a finger and saying, you know, you're hopeless.
So that's kind of the one of the trick I see, like as you're coaching me through this, like when you reparent yourself, as you changing that script from this critical parent or that tells you that it's your fault that they're not loving you, and that the story that we tell ourselves, right? It's not helpful. And these stories, realizing it's not helpful. So if we switch to a more helpful way, would be that loving, unconditional, and total acceptance part of us that we can also give ourselves. Thank you. I would like to read one of your posts that you posted lately, because it really represents like your sense of humor, and I think it's very good because it's thought provoking. So you wrote, I'll try to say it in your good tone. You know what I hate? People doing shit other than what I tell them to do. It's really annoying. All these fucking people in my life just making their own fucking decisions. They don't even think to ask. They just go ahead and do it. No consultation. And when I ask them about this, they come up with some bullshit about free will, about being an independent identity from me. And then you go on this rant about people not doing what you want, and you having your source, like you want them to give you love, or you want them to give you security, and they don't do it, and you go on this rant. And I find it like, yes, you express in this humorous ways the pattern that we may sometimes be into, and I think this is so such a fun way and such a thought-provoking way to address the issue. And then you come with this pill of wisdom at the end. Like, this is all the story, the introduction for this pill of wisdom. Underneath the layers of yourself that desperately seek to outsource responsibility onto others lies a core strength that carries its own weight.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that's the journey in a nutshell that you invite people to embark on, and you can also accompany them in that journey as a guide, right?
100%. And it's a true it's a beautiful thing to withdraw to realize that, you know, the needs that we're placing upon one particular person to see that really we're being, you know, in our innocence, we're really being a bit of a dictator. You know, we're going to a person and we're saying, you know, you have to love me. You know, that's your job to love me. And if you don't love me, I'm going to be kicking and screaming about it.
Having a temper tantrum.
Yes. So we're outsourcing that source of love, and that leads to all kinds of insanity. It can also be a beautiful thing. I just want to make it clear that you know, you can have beautiful supportive relationships where you do rely on someone else for love to a certain degree, but that can only happen once we've done this process of withdrawing that demand, because it can never be a demand. No one's ever going to respond well to a demand. Withdrawing that demand and coming back to the true source of love, which is you know, whatever you want to say. It could be the divine, or it could be nature, it could be God, it could be source, or it could be self. And really grounding ourselves in that source of love. And once we've done that, those beautiful, healthy relationships are the result of that. They're there because we can come into a relationship with no demands, and we can also provide a really clean, beautiful source of love for other people.
Not a conditional, like I love you as long as you love me, but also allowing other people to love you instead of demanding other people to be a certain way, to love you the way that you want to be loved. Because that's something we realize that as adults and when we are in a couple, that we cannot outsource like another person to bring us happiness. Happiness is it's a decision for ourselves. We cannot outsource that to somebody else. And I think even in romantic comedies and stuff in culture, we always tend to externalize and like, once I find this special person, I will be happy. But happiness is an inside job. I see that too in what you're sharing. And also, I would like to add another post that you made lately. The same action that will attract the people you want in your life is the exact same action that will turn off those you don't. Your willingness to be offensive to the wrong people is your willingness to be attractive to the right. And I find that so interesting because when we are in this dynamic of needing the love of someone, we tend to go into people pleasing, don't we? And we tend to not try to be offensive. And I like what you say, like there's wrong people and there's right people.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I can't overemphasize how much of a process and how many layers there are to people pleasing. And it all connects in. It's all the same story of trying to make sure that we have reliable sources of love. It's all the same story, ultimately. And that's one of the huge benefits of this healing work, is that as we unravel that in ourselves and start to come back to ourselves as the source of love, it doesn't just create beautiful relationships. It creates an environment where I can go into the world and just be myself without that fear of rejection curtailing my expression.
And I guess that feels light. I mean, that's that's something huge, just to be able to be truly ourselves without all these layers of protection. I mean, this is scary for most people, but for people who have this abandonment issue, it's even worse.
Yeah, it's 10 times worse. It's a real feeling that I can't be myself. If I be myself, and that was the experience as a child on some level, whenever I be, there's some part of me that is defective, because when I be that, I get rejected from my parental figure. So I need to take that part of myself and I need to stuff it down into my unconscious and so it doesn't get expressed. So as adults, when we are recovering and integrating and individuating, those parts that went through that process as a child, when they come to the surface, which they will, because they're an essential part of our nature, it will be terrifying. Like, it will be terrifying because it will feel like all that feeling of abandonment that was so associated with that will also come with it. So it's like, if I be myself, I'm going to be abandoned, and that has to be re-experienced as an adult with the added wisdom and presence that we bring as an adult. That's why we couldn't do it as a child. We didn't have that, and that's fair enough.
Resources, yeah. So now, as an adult, we have access to resources to reparent ourselves and give ourselves what was missing. What would be your advice for someone who recognizes himself or herself in these issues? What would be the first step that you recommend? What about counseling? What's the importance of counseling in that case?
So everyone has everything they need from within and also without. So there's a divine process of healing that starts as soon as we decide my priority is healing. Then the universe itself will come, and that could be, it doesn't have to be a counselor. It could be a friend. It could be a retreat that you go on for 2 weeks. It could be a program. It could be just a willingness to, I mean, some people go to jail and heal this stuff in jail, so it doesn't actually even require anyone else. But if we want to do it as gently as possible, then having a counselor is an incredible thing, because they can really sit with you as you experience those emotions, and they're a grounding, loving, present figure that is extremely healing, because it's what we wanted as a child. We wanted to be able to really express ourselves and be held in that, and that's what a counselor does. And it's an incredible way to have that as a stepping stone to acquiring our full independence. So yes, get a counselor, get a good counselor. Start reading books about psychology books, understanding the dynamics, observing the dynamics, being present to oneself, and just take the opportunities that come. Just receive the gifts that come from the universe, and you will be taken through a process, and have faith in that process.
All right, thank you so much, Lloyd. I will put the link to your Last Mile counseling so people can reach you, because I think when we it's a teamwork. No, we have to have that good feeling with the therapist, the counselor, so that it works. So if people get your vibe and want your kind of presence, that thing that you give and relate to you, I mean, I encourage anyone to get in touch with you and have a session with you. So I will put the link so that they can reach and schedule a session with you.
Yeah, look, I'm totally open to receiving anyone who feels resonant. Yeah. And thank you, Rosaline. I really enjoy talking about this. It's a real pleasure. Yeah, thank you for that opportunity.
It was my pleasure. I thank you. And so thank you for other people listening to this podcast. And also remember that there's a challenge going on. So you can sign up and get a free journal. So you can journal about what your experience is as you're listening to these interviews. And this will also be put in the description with this podcast. So see you. There's 2 more interviews to listen to. And I wish you well on your own personal healing journey. Thank you. Bye-bye.